Hi, welcome back to the channel. We're the Touring Townsends. That's my husband David. I'm Jill and we drive a Cartago Liner for 2 motorhome that we picked up at the end of October last year, brand new. Since picking the motorhome up, we've had a number of problems with the engine, which we documented in the last video. And it finished with us breaking down in Shetland 1 week into a 4-week trip. We managed to get the motorhome back to our house because it was an intermittent problem, and we were waiting for it to go to the Fiat Professional Garage in Manchester to be looked at. So we took the van to Manchester, and after a couple of days they diagnosed the problem as a BCM, the body control module. Now this is particular to the vehicle, so we had to wait for one to be ordered and sent over from Italy and fitted, and the keys had to be programmed to it, and this all took a couple more days, so we had to wait about 9 or 10 days. Once they said it was fixed, we went to Manchester to pick it up, and as soon as we started the engine, the warning light came on once again. Exact same warning light, check power steering. So we left the van with them and they tried all sorts of things. And eventually, after a couple of weeks, they decided it was a power steering rack or something like that. I'm no mechanic. But they needed to order the part, and the part was on back order. Now, we had a family trip away planned for the end of July. This meant that we got campsites booked, which we wouldn't normally pre-book, but we had because we were doing this with family, and we paid for them. Only one of them was going to give us a refund, so we were in a real quandary. The part wasn't likely to come in for several weeks, was the best estimate at that point. And when we spoke to the garage, they actually recommended that we would be fine to take the motorhome away because the problem was intermittent, only on ignition, and as soon as you restarted the engine, the problem seemed to disappear. So we had a long think about it, and rather uneasily decided we were going to try and go away in the motorhome as it was. So we set off on July 25th, the plan being to do a number of short trips, gradually heading south, and just see how the van behaved as we went. We drove 60 miles the first day, and stayed at a small inn on a canal, only £10 a night, and no warning lights, which was the main thing at that point. Having had a good night's sleep there, we moved another 60 miles south. This time staying at Manor Farm, which was a CL, and we've been there before. It's a beautiful place, really nice views. We had a lovely walk in the afternoon, and again, we'd had no problems with the motorhome. The next day, we drove to see some family further south, and again, no problems, no lights, no nothing. Van was driving just fine. We had a nice visit with family, and then we moved further south near Dover, ready to catch a ferry the next day. We got on the ferry in the morning, beautiful day, really sunny, and once we were in France, we headed towards Belgium, which was where we were going to meet up with family in a couple of days' time. So we spent a couple of nights just across the French border into Belgium in a small place called Coxside. We were staying on an air, €25 a night, laid out like a campsite, huge pitches, lots of space, no toilets or showers or anything, but we didn't need that. And we had a nice relaxing stay as we started to believe that the van might actually be okay for this trip. After 2 days we moved on and we met up with my sister and her family, firstly in Bruges for 3 nights. We stayed at Camping Memling on the outskirts of Bruges, which was really well positioned for getting into the city each day, but nice and quiet in an evening. A busy little campsite, but we actually really liked it. After Bruges, we moved on to Delft, which was actually our favourite of the cities that we visited, and we explored Delft, we did some cycling while we were there, and then we moved on to Amsterdam. Amsterdam was probably the busiest place that we visited, but we did a walking tour while we were there, we did a boat trip. We then moved on to a place near Tollen, basically on one of the many sort of inlets, all of the islands that are interconnected in Netherlands. And we had a couple of days just relaxing, enjoying some really nice weather. There was a swimming pool, a beach, so that was really good. That was the end of our trip with the family. We moved back to Belgium, having decided that we wanted to head south as the weather, although nice in places, hadn't been that warm. We stopped off in Coxyder again because we knew that air was there and the weather was due to be very hot for a couple of days. So we had 2 days in Coxyder and then started to head south. So our first stop southwards was in Picardy, a little place called Caen, where we managed to get onto the municipal air for €10 a night. No electric hookup, but services. Now this was the middle weekend of August, which in France is always heavingly busy, so we were very happy to find a parking spot and we decided to stay put for a couple of days. The forecast was actually really good, so we were going to get some nice weather to sit on the beach a bit, and we didn't want to be trying to get into places for this bank holiday weekend. While we were there, we cycled to Le Crotoy, which was a really nice cycle, past quite a few bird reserves and marshes. And Le Crotoy itself was a very nice place. We've seen it from across the water on the other side before, but we'd never actually visited. So we had a nice drink there, we had a walk around, and then we cycled back to the air in Caen. The next day, we managed to get some oysters and mussels from one of the little sellers in the village, super cheap. And Dave's always wanted to shuck his own oysters, so he managed to do that evening. And we spent the day on the beach, beautiful weather and a really peaceful day. We then decided to move on. The next place we headed to was Le Triport. Unfortunately, the air in Le Triport was very busy and we were unable to find a space. But we managed to get into a camping car park area nearby at a place called Flock, and from there we could walk into Le Triport and explore. It was a lovely place. The weather wasn't very good, quite grey, but we still got to see the lovely seafront with really old medieval villas and a really nice promenade to walk on. Everything was going well with the van, so we decided to continue heading south, and our next stop was going to be at Honfleur, somewhere we'd seen on other YouTube videos and really liked the look of. But we knew the air was very busy, so we were determined to try and get there before midday to secure a spot. On the way there, because things were going so well, we booked a return ferry for mid-September from Santander, thinking that we would head right down the southwest coast, possibly into northern Spain for a while, before heading home. On arrival at Honfleur, we were really happy to see plenty of spaces, and we drove through the air looking for somewhere to park. We stopped in the middle section because we were debating whether to go into the space in front of us or behind, put the vehicle into park while we debated, and when we came to move into the space behind us, the vehicle was stuck in park. Nothing we did would get that vehicle out of park. So there we were, stuck in the middle of the air, blocking access. Vans were having to manoeuvre around us to get to the parking spaces that we'd been eyeing up. And we were there for an hour and a half. During that time, we phoned Fiat Assistance and they started to arrange a recovery vehicle, which apparently was going to be difficult because the vehicle was stuck in park. We couldn't move it, so they'd need something to lift us. In the meantime, we got onto Google and started to try and find a solution, even if it's just a temporary solution. And eventually we managed to find a YouTube video that showed us how to get out of park, at least temporarily. We levered the cover off the gear stick, and underneath the cover there's a little button. Who knew? But we pressed that button while we moved the gear stick and we got it out of park, and we were able to reverse into a space. The relief was huge. We'd been so embarrassed, stuck in the middle like that. We didn't feel like we could open any windows because we didn't want to make it look like we were stopping there. So we'd got hotter and hotter inside. We'd arrived just after midday, so it was lunchtime while we were stuck as well. But once we got it moved into a space, at least we could relax a little bit. So we phoned Fiat Assistance back and said, we don't need that recovery vehicle now. We can move the vehicle a little bit. So let's wait until tomorrow, because this was a Sunday. So of course all garages were shut. So even if a recovery vehicle had taken us somewhere, it wouldn't have been to a garage. It would have just been outside. And we didn't know if that garage would then accept us the next day. So we opted to go and explore Honfleur, as that's what we'd come for. We had a walk around. It's quite hard to enjoy somewhere when you're so tense about a breakdown, but we did our best to have a nice afternoon and evening. And next morning, Fiat Assistance eventually called us back and offered us an appointment at a Fiat professional garage in 8 days, or 9. So that was the best they could offer us. So we said, we'll go ahead, book the 8 days one. What are we going to do in the meantime? We didn't feel that we could stay on that air. It wasn't clear whether there was a restriction on how many days you could stay, but it was very busy. And although Honfleur was really nice, it wasn't 8 days worth nice. So we wanted to move. Fiat Assistance offered to arrange a recovery vehicle to take us to a campsite. But we just couldn't imagine the logistics of a recovery vehicle going onto a French campsite, depositing us in a space, then coming back and picking us up. It just seemed like a horrendous logistical nightmare. So we decided that we were going to try this handy little button under the gear lever and move ourselves somewhere. So after 2 nights at Honfleur, we moved. It was the tensest I think we've ever been driving the vehicle, because I think we were both really concerned that we might get stuck and it would be on a road where there was nowhere to put the vehicle safely, and then we would have to wait for recovery sat in the middle of a road, potentially blocking the way. So it was a super tense journey. We didn't go far. We'd found an air that had lots of space around it so that if we did need to be recovered from there, a vehicle could get on. So we drove there and we got parked up safely. Huge relief. We spent 2 nights there. It was called La Grande Pommeraye, I think, and it was near a small place called Villeville. From there we were able to get a bus into Villeville, which we had a little walk around, and then the next day we got a bus to Trouville-sur-Mer, which was actually a lovely place. We had a very nice day walking around Trouville. The weather wasn't very good at this point, typical Normandy weather, showers, grey skies. But Trouville was pretty and we did have quite a nice day there. Unfortunately, there wasn't really anywhere to walk to from that air, so we decided to once again try the button and see if we could move the van to somewhere that was a bit better placed. So we drove to Villers-sur-Mer. Not far away, just on the coast this time, and an air that's very busy. It's known to be really busy. It's recommended to arrive early. So we got up early specially, and we managed to get a space without any difficulty. There's a lovely little town, seaside village type vibes with some marshes nearby. Not many birds around that time of year, but it did give us somewhere to go for a walk. And we had 2 very peaceful nights there before again we moved on. As it was weekend now, we'd booked onto a campsite to be sure of somewhere to stay, so we drove to Camping de la Mer at Merville-Franceville. This was quite close to Caen now, which was where we would be taking the vehicle for repair eventually. So we settled in, and it was a lovely campsite right on the beach. We didn't get a beachfront plot, but we were very close, and it was perfect for us because lots of space to drive around. Some campsites can be very tight, but this one had a nice big area for motorhomes, and we were very settled there for a couple of days. We took a cycle up the estuary towards Caen, and we visited Pegasus Bridge, which we didn't really know that much about beforehand, had lunch there, and then cycled back. Now, unfortunately, the campsite don't open the gates until about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, and the garage had asked for us to get the van there first thing in the morning, 7:30 we were told. So we had to leave the campsite to park in an air where we could get up and leave early without any difficulties. The air that we'd chosen was in a place called Bretteville-sur-Odon, and it was ideally placed for the garage next morning. It was about a 20-minute drive around the périphérique, so no small roads to navigate. But unfortunately, it was very close to the motorway, and that meant there was a constant hum of road noise. So not the best place to stay, and we probably would never go back there, but it served our purpose for that one night. That day was probably the hottest day of our stay. Typical, we weren't anywhere near a beach. So we went for a cycle ride down an old railway track, which was actually really shady, so it was quite pleasant. And it got us both active, which meant that we had a chance of sleeping that night, even though we were very anxious about what they would find when we took the van to the garage the next morning. We arrived at the garage in a tiny village called Caen next morning at 7:30 as requested by Fiat, only to be told they were expecting us on a recovery vehicle some point that day. As a result, they couldn't look at the van until 2 o'clock that afternoon. So that early morning was for nothing, which was frustrating. We had a little look round the village, Caen. There wasn't a great deal to see. It was very small. We had a coffee, and then we decided to get a bus into Caen, where at least we could find places to wander and have a lunch out while we were there. We had quite a nice lunch in Caen. We had visited before, so it wasn't new to us, and we were back at the garage by 3:30, where they diagnosed the problem. It was the gear lever that was broken, apparently, and it was going to take them a week to get the part. Of course it was. So their advice was, don't drive the vehicle unless you have to. We didn't own up to how many times we'd moved it in the last week, but they said, go to a campsite and stay there until you come back when the part's ready. So we went back to the campsite we'd stayed at on the weekend, knowing that that had plenty of space and was very manoeuvrable for a motorhome, and we got set up there no problem. We stayed at that campsite for 7 nights, and that was probably a few nights longer than we needed to, really. We had explored the area rather thoroughly by this point. We managed to get a hire car from Fiat, which we had to pick up in Caen, so bus ride in to get it. But that meant that at least we could do shopping, go to the supermarket. We were able to drive to Bayeux to visit the tapestry before it departed France for the UK. And generally, it just gave us that bit more freedom to travel around the area rather being stuck in the one place. The weather wasn't particularly good that week, but we did manage to get up and down the coast a bit. And after 7 nights, we knew that we'd got another couple of nights to kill. The part had come in, but they couldn't fit us in for a couple more days. So this was now 9 days since they had diagnosed the problem. So we moved. We ignored their advice and we moved to an air the other side of Caen, so at least we'd got a change of scene. The air was in a small place called Hermanville-sur-Mer. It was camping car park, which we use quite regularly, although we never pre-book because you have to pay to do that. But we knew there were spaces by looking on the app, so we were able to park up there, and it was actually a very nice little village, very quiet, a boulangerie within a few minutes walk, and a little supermarket. So we were quite settled there for the 2 nights that we needed to stay before we went for the repairs. We took a bus into Weestrum on the second day, having sat all morning while it rained. We did get caught in quite a shower as well. The weather was really not cooperating, and we were very much mourning the loss of our trip south as we waited for this van repair to take place. We arrived at the garage as requested, first thing in the morning again, and were booked in and told to come back later in the day. They would let us know when. So we once again took a bus into Caen. We had a walk around the castle, which we didn't do on the last visit, and we went back to the same little restaurant for lunch because it had been such a nice lunch the first time, before getting the bus back to the garage, where just as we got on the bus they messaged to say it was fixed. Huge relief, because you always wonder, will that fix the problem? Is it going to be something else? So we were very relieved to collect the van at 3:30 in the afternoon and start to head away from that area, which we were thoroughly sick of by this point. Once we'd known that the van was going to be stuck in that area for a while, we'd rearranged the ferry from Santander. There was no way we were going to make it to Santander in time now. We did have to be back in the UK mid-September because our car was due for an MOT. So we rearranged the ferry crossing to go from Brittany instead, and we headed on that day, having got the van fixed, towards Brittany. We managed to get a couple of hours travel under our belts, and then we stopped in a little place called Dol de Bretagne just to get a night's sleep before we finally managed to get onto the coast of Brittany and restart our holiday. Dol de Bretagne turned out to be a beautiful little place, so convenient for the main road, and beautiful huge cathedral, nice medieval streets, big supermarket in walking distance. So ticked all the boxes, and I think we will go back and visit it further. That day we drove several hours to get well into Brittany. Our ferry was from Roscoff, so we knew we could travel quite far into Brittany. We'd got a week at this point before we were due to catch the ferry. Our first night's stop on the coast was in a camping car park at a place called Landrelec, and this had a beautiful beach, white sands, absolutely gorgeous, and it was just typical Brittany coastline, lots of rocky little coves, really pretty and really quiet. Given how beautiful it was, we were surprised how quiet it was. The next night we moved on to the campsite next door because they had an Axie offer was back on because it was now September. So we got a nice cheap stay, bit cramped on the pitch. I must say we did regret moving a little bit, and we had a day on the beach, which was wonderful after the rather bad weather we'd had recently. From Landrelec, we moved a little bit further along the coast to a small island called Ile Grande. There was an air there, again next to a campsite, but we opted for the air. It was very cheap and it's fulfilled our needs. We didn't need electric hookup at this point. It was nice and sunny, the solar was doing its job, and we spent the day walking around the island. You can walk the whole coastline, it's only about 7 kilometres, but really pretty. The tide was particularly big at the time, so going out a long way, coming in a long way, which made it much more dramatic when the tide did come in, but unfortunately it was low tide for most of our walk. But we really enjoyed that walk around the island, and then we moved on the next day again. This time we stopped at a small campsite in a place called Locomo. The campsite was empty. I think there were only about 5 or 6 other vehicles on there, and it was €13 a night. Not axi, just that was the price for September. They were closing in a couple of weeks' time, so obviously winding down. Again, the big tides were really affecting the area. So low tide, the tide had gone for miles, and then at high tide it would come rushing in quite quickly, so very dramatic. And Locomo had a beautiful little harbour, and it was really pretty. We had a couple of walks while we were there for 2 nights, and just really started to unwind, relax, believe that the van was going to be okay for this period. And we'd also heard that the part for the power steering problem had finally arrived, and we were booked in to get that replaced just after we got back home. We moved on towards Roscoff for our final night, stopping in the air at Saint Paul de Leon, about €8 to stay there, right on the seafront, the very empty seafront when we parked up. But again, the tide did come fully in very quickly later in the day. And again, we had a nice walk around the coastline and really appreciated our last few hours. It was quite windy, but that was becoming par for the course. It was typical September weather for that part of the world. We drove to Roscoff the next day, parking in the station car park for the morning while we had a little walk around. Roscoff, definitely worth a visit again as well. We really liked it. And then we were back on the ferry and heading for home. So we're back home, having safely got back without any more warning lights. I think we're both checking constantly to make sure that nothing's wrong. The van goes into the garage tomorrow to get the steering rack replaced. And once it's back home, we're going to have a trip in the UK. We need to test this van out. We really don't trust it anymore. I don't think we'll be going abroad for a while until we're 100% confident that it isn't going to break down on us when we're away and we get stuck. If you've enjoyed this video, perhaps press the like button or think about subscribing. In our next video, we'll be heading to southern Scotland, and we're hoping to have a trouble-free trip in this motorhome for a change.